There is a fifth dimension.
About the unknown.
Beyond that which is known to man.
The Garden of Thought.
The Babylon Project was our last best hope for peace.
Unexplained.
Mythologies.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call...
The Garden of Thought with Jeff Lippman.
Eventually, our sun will grow cold and go out.
You're listening to something much bigger, something hidden in plain sight.
It won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein. All of us was for nothing unless we go to the stars.
What you're about to learn will completely change the way you experience your mind, your thoughts, and yourself.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name.
The Garden of Thought.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Thought, and we have returning guest Dr. Ed Barnhart, who you know from lots of places, including Earth Ancients, Graham Hancock's show, which I forget the name of at the moment, his podcast Archaeo Ed, and hopefully most importantly being on this show before. And we're going to talk about Angkor Wat and the Khmer and sort of the southeastern parts of Asia, and I'm not going to say a lot because it's Super Bowl Sunday and Ed's got stuff to do and he's going to a party and he forgot it was a Super Bowl when we scheduled this. So the best part of the show is you're going to hear very little from me. Welcome, Ed. Take over.
Oh, well, I hope this is a discussion. I think people want to hear from you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on again. You know, it would help me if we had some burning questions of yours that I could shape what I talk about around.
Okay. I was surprised, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, to learn that there were all sorts of empires around the world that I had never heard of. I had heard of the Khmer Rouge, but I, never really thought where the name came from. It just was like the last name of someone or a region, and Rouge obviously means red in French, so it's probably for blood, or red, socialist, communist, standard theme. I then learned from a podcast that is no longer in existence, which is sad, called Forgotten Empires or Lost Empires, that there were, in fact, lots of empires in that world, parts of the world, and I'm using a very large gradient from Tibetan to even Nepalese and then Burmese, and everyone's had an empire at some point, and I learned about the Khmer. Angkor Wat, of course, is something that's one of the wonders of the world, a place of great mystery and probably misinformation as well. And so, of course, I'm interested in that ancient culture and the empire and what Angkor Wat was all about. The Stegasaurus that probably isn't a Stegasaurus, or even better if it was, but I don't think it is. And, if we know anything about their usual stuff, like their gods, their pantheon, legends, lore, whatever you got. I'm trying to be very 30,000 feet because being brief isn't my specialty.
Okay, well, let's start with the big picture of who we're talking about. And then we'll get into finer details, perhaps the Stegosaurus as well. First off, this Angkor is this beautiful city, a capital city of the Khmer Empire, which went from about 800 CE to the late 1300s when they were defeated by and absorbed into the kingdom of Siam, which is Thailand. The Thai people ultimately defeated the Khmer people. That's Khmer civilization. Angkor is the capital of a civilization of millions of people that existed in those 600 years as a unified empire. And it was in Cambodia. That's the heart of it. So it's Southeast Asia. They're not the only civilization there, as you mentioned. They have a very wide-reaching and complex political system going on over there. They've got where modern Thailand is, they have the Thai people, who are sometimes their allies and ultimately their enemies.
Right now.
You've got the entire India, which is thriving at that time. Then you have Indonesia, which is also a huge empire, building temples much the same way that the Khmer and the Indians are. Those kind of beehived temples are all across that region, Southeast Asia and into India. And then they have other smaller groups. There's one that the Khmer fight all the time called the Cham. And they live in basically modern-day Vietnam. And they come up with huge armies to menace the Khmer again and again. Sometimes the Khmer get help from the Indian empires to beat the Cham off. It's a very dynamic area, but for 600 years, this Khmer civilization, which, as you say, not many people even hear the word Khmer, but actually there are still millions of people who speak, in their words, they call it Khmer. I don't know why we spell it Khmer, but it comes out of their mouth, Khmer.
Blame the French.
It's still a thriving culture. Their religion was mostly Hinduism, though they vacillated back and forth depending on what king was in the throne. Some of them went to Buddhism. Some of them went to different kinds of Buddhism. There's that higher vehicle and lower vehicle part of Buddhism. So it was interesting how their religion changed from king to king. But it was Hinduism and Buddhism that they flopped back and forth of. And of course, Buddhism is born out of Hinduism.
Right.
So they share a lot in the same way that the Judeo-Christian religions share so much, even though they're at each other's throats as well. They all share what Christians call the Old Testament. It's in every one of theirs. It's very similar with Buddhism and Hinduism, where a king could hop on the throne and say, we're Buddhists now. But it didn't really change their the pantheon and the religion element of it. I mean, of course, Buddhism got into that kind of it gets away from that fascinating pantheon of gods that the Hindus worshipped. But back in those times, we still see all those Hindu gods all over the temples, regardless of who's on the throne.
So, but it was more like Hindu, like your Vishnus and your Kalis and your Ganeshas, than sort of like your Shintoism and your Jade Emperor and, magic dragons.
Yep. Throughout the Khmer period, they covered their temples in this beautiful and very illustrative art, where we see all those gods and the elements of the creation story of the Hindus with Mount Meru and the Apsaras and the demons and the angels in our vernacular, the Devas and the Asuras. But so the religion is all over all of their temples. Angkor, just a few more things about Angkor. Why is it so impressive? It was a city of almost 1 million people by 1350.
Wow.
Which is absolutely gigantic. That dwarfed any city in the West, for sure. I think there were a couple of Chinese ones that gave them a run for their money in that same time period. But the European cities, for sure, were a fraction of the size of Angkor. Its temple complexes within the city center are so big that entire Maya cities would fit inside just the walls of one complex.
Oh my goodness.
Angkor Thom, for example, is 3 kilometers by 3 kilometers on a side, covered by a wall and a moat, and a bunch of temple complexes inside. But at 3 by 3 kilometers, all of Tikal would fit inside just one section of Angkor.
I was just lost in my thoughts about thinking about what friend of mine named Tom I should call Angkor Tom, and I realized it would not fit for any of them, so it's not going to work. Now, I know that this is probably widely speculated, but what was the population of the Earth around that time when there were 1 million people in that city? Because if I'm not mistaken, I'm not even sure that we were up to 1 billion worldwide at that time.
Oh gosh, I don't know that statistic, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. We've grown exponentially since the 1300s.
Yeah.
But, there were certainly millions of people. I think at that time, one of the huge population centers was Asia. I mean, we've got, Southeast Asia had civilizations that by the time we hit even, the beginning of the Khmer Empire, which is 800 CE, we have thousands and thousands of years of major civilizations in China and in India. And those two, the big China and India, they kind of go back and forth dominating Southeast Asia into Indonesia and the islands there. So both of those civilizations had intense impacts and were very successful civilizations that produced populations of millions of people.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. That was my smoke alarm, which goes off at the first sign of anyone cooking even fried eggs. So I apologize for that, and had to hit the mute button as soon as I could, and as such, I was not able to speak when there was a natural pause for Ed to want me to chime in and speak.
Well, very professionally done there. I didn't hear it at all.
Oh, well, good. Then everyone ignore me. I was just being rude. Anyway. So I said it Angkor Wat, and it's Angkor Wat. So why did I say it Angkor Wat? Is it just I'm a jabroni, or is that something that's out there, or is it that I'm confusing it with the monster from Godzilla named Anguirra?
Well, I really can't speak to the origin of your mistake, but it is Angkor. In fact, the city itself is called Angkor. We oftentimes confuse the entire city with just one beautiful complex within it called Angkor Wat. Maybe in post you can pull up a map of the city and show how utterly small actually Angkor Wat is compared to the entire city. When I bring people over to Southeast Asia to see Angkor, it takes us an entire week just to get through all the various complexes.
Oh my goodness.
The one, I think that you mentioned that Stegasaurus, which is so popular.
Yes.
I think that's in Ta Prohm. And that was the same, that has those beautiful banyan trees growing all over the temples and those, coffee table pictures. It's also the location that a lot of Tomb Raider was shot in.
Is there anything specific about the Wat location that it's that everybody or most everyone has heard of that versus all of the other sites, which I'm sure are, similarly amazing?
Well, they are all amazing. I think, and I could be wrong on this, but, Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom. I think those are, the temple of Angkor, the palace complex of Angkor, or so Thom means something. Thom means city. Thom means city. So those are descriptive words that are put onto this is this kind of thing in Angkor. This is that kind of thing in Angkor. But Angkor Wat is so celebrated because of the incredible art on its walls and the sophistication of its architecture. It's really, there's so much to see and absorb there. When I think that the complex, if you walk in one side and go out the other gate, it's about 1 kilometer long, and you go through this long causeway into this complex of buildings with 3 different tiers, and then you finally get up to the upper tier, and the art around that building and inside of it is just world class, amazing stuff. Just very, ornate, or I guess if it was in Europe, we'd call it Baroque. Very busy art. And the galleries of Angkor Wat there are these panels that go on for meters and meters and meters, showing epic battles and elements of the Hindu creation story, the Ramayana and the creation story. Just every wall of the interior of Angkor is carved with a fantastic panel. Some of them are as long as a football field.
So I'm going to guess that the Wat location then is sort of a temple religious structure as opposed to a palace, because only palaces and temples get that kind of treatment. Usually. I should never say only.
Well, yes, though, like most religion or civilizations in the past, they don't draw that much of a distinction between politics and religion.
Right.
So, the king's temples are also full of absolutely fantastic art.
So, I don't know, is there sort of a brief summary of what is the Indian creation story, the Indus Valley, and I guess on East creation story?
Oh, I don't know whether I'm good enough to give you a summary of that. I mean, there's a big, wide group of stories that are all about, I don't know whether I would say creation, like how the world began, but there are stories of the gods and their deeds and their reincarnations. One of the tricky things about Hinduism is that there's kind of a concept of infinity, never-ending things. There's a lot of their wise things that come out of their religious documents are gods recognizing that I am in my one form here, but there will be millions of forms after me, and there have been millions of forms before me. There's kind of an eternity element, which is fascinating.
Well, it ties in with the reincarnation and the molting of the snake and all that. I don't remember the specifics of the Indian origin story either, but luckily enough there are shows on that. I think there's at least two, one which was mostly from a Vedic perspective, and another was from a publisher from Laugh Publishing, and they both did great jobs on that. I'm not sure. And there's also stuff like, again, like you said, the creation story is not altogether all that different from a lot of creation stories, or at least there's similar themes or myth themes that we see around.
There is one element, actually, that's very important to the architecture of not just Angkor, but temples across Southeast Asia and into India, which is the story of the battle around Mount Meru.
Right.
It's on this island in the middle of the universe.
Right.
And it's a battle between Devas and Asuras, which are basically good guys and bad guys.
Right.
And we could call them demons and angels and things.
But the Devas are the good guys, and then I want to clear up, because like you hear Deva, you think, devil, and maybe that's where the word came from, but the Devas are the good guys. So just like you like a diva, Devas are the good guys here.
Right. And let me say before I go further, I am not an expert in Hindu religion. I am not a Hindu. I worry that I would offend someone in my summary of this story, and I might even get some of the parts wrong. So I'm just doing my best here.
Caveat accepted.
But basically, there is this magical substance called Amarita that they both want, and will give them ultimate power and kind of mess up the balance. They're either good or bad gets it. And they have
the Infinity Stones.
This sea of milk that's around this island that Mount Meru's on. And the island is actually some weird back of a turtle in some images.
Of course.
But in any event, they know that neither one of them can actually have the power to get this Amarita to basically excrete out of the sea of milk. So they wrap this big rope around the island, which is actually a big snake, and they pull it back and forth like a tug of war. And it's like a little mixer in the milk, and it froths up the milk. And that Amarita comes out, and at the same time, these beautiful, voluptuous women called apsaras. They're like wood nymphs. They're naked, they're beautiful, they're busty.
They're blue.
Milk as well. So there's this magic stuff, and the asuras, or the apsaras, which are all over the walls of Angkor. These apsaras are apsaras are coming out. In fact, the archaeological authorities there decided to call their authorities office Apsara.
Oh.
So it's a very important element here, these beautiful women that are coming out. This is where I forget a little bit of the story, but there is a final bit where who's going to get the Amarita turns out to be the Devas. The Devas get it, but only through tricking and lying to the Asuras. They somehow trick them into faltering, and they get the good stuff. And so they're now the more powerful beings. This is up until now.
So it's like...
So I wish I remembered exactly how they cheated them, but I've always... it struck me as weird that the good guys cheated.
But, well... see the Trojan War for reference. I mean, it's and who knows? Maybe that theme was lifted from there as well.
Maybe I have my angle wrong on it, and it was more like guile and
sure,
fair play trickery.
That's right. The brains over brawn. Let's
in any event, right. That story, I tell that story because every one of those beehive-shaped temples that you see all over Angkor, they are recreations of Mount Meru. And so they are recreating the essential elements of an important part of their creation story. The Apsaras are all over the walls. When you go into some of these temple complexes, especially Angkor Thom, all 4 of its gates in this huge 3-kilometer thing have a bridge going over the moat, and the bridge is lined with Asuras and Devas that are all pulling the snake.
Sure.
And so they're showing us through that architectural complex that Angkor Thom and all of those temples that are beehive shaped are recreations of Mount Meru, and the temple and the that means that the ceremonies they're doing inside those temples are in the symbolic center of the universe, which that island and Mount Meru are. So they are centering the universe at those temples by building them in that fashion.
Right.
It's very overt.
3 points. 2 maybe are useful. 1 is definitely not, purposely so. One useful one is that there seems to be a lot of cultures, mythologies, legends, lore that tie sort of where they are, their place, their holy place as being sort of the navel of the world. So it seems like sort of that kind of thing. Then I'm going to throw in the definitely not useful in any. Now that we're doing a tug of war, Angkor Thom really seems more important because you need a good anchor to win a tug of war. So I have 2 friends named Tom, but one is deceased, but both are very large men, even the one deceased, so I still can't decide who to give the Angkor Thom, but the one that's alive really doesn't do anything I say, so I actually have a better chance with my deceased friend.
Joke, Jeff. You just gotta, you gotta long game this. You gotta establish a group of tug of war, a game, and then put Tom at the end, and then boom, you hit him with your Angkor Thom joke.
Thank you for your support. See, I love when I get the intellectuals and academics and the elites of the world agreeing with me. It's so funny when I listen to so many sources calling other people elites, and I'm like, you're on the Upper East Side doing a podcast. You are elite. Shut up. And it's like everyone says someone else is the elite. It's anyway, another story. So the other thing that
days, even the ones that are pretty rich are paupers compared to the guys at the top.
There's always someone more elite, that's for sure. All right. So the other thing that's important to this, or I think it is that it's very usual going back millennia that gods lived on mountains. So sort of like pyramid culture, sort of rebuilding mountains so that the kings and whatnot could be closer to the gods, or maybe at some point sort of become the gods. Either way, I'm sure it differs from place to place. But is any of that sort of evident here?
Well, number two we'll put aside, but your first one and your third one are right on the money. Or at least I agree with you.
Okay.
There's a possibility we're both just far afield, but the idea that religions, through their ceremonies and the architecture they build, want to recreate the center of the universe where their temples are in a symbolic way, that is very global. Their religions do this again and again and again. They retell their creation stories, and they position themselves as the center of the universe.
I find it so strange, or maybe it's not strange at all, and I know we're not here to talk about the Bible at all, but the Babel story is almost like, God saying, don't do that, but everyone else has been doing that. And I'm not sure what the distinction or the meaning there is, or if there's any lesson to take from that other than what those writers or collaborators thought at that given time. But it popped into my head, and it's my podcast, so it's going to pop out of my mouth. So I don't know if you've ever had to study any of that. I mean, that's not really your field at all, but I mean, things do intersect.
I grew up Catholic, and yes, I think that it appalls some people to look at the Bible in an anthropological lens, but if you do see a lot of parallels to a lot of other creation stories and religious foundation stories.
And other. I mean, listen, YouTube is wonderful, but it can be dangerous also, and I try to cure it. But I saw something where it was like the 10 creepiest stories in the Bible, and there were at least 3 major themes from episodes of Game of Thrones they lifted right out of those stories. And one day I'm going to review that video and talk about that, but today will not be that day. Well,
the one that gets me, we're looking at the world has some categories of religion. There's the Judeo-Christian religions, the Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And then you have the Southeast Asia epicenter, where we have basically Hinduism and Buddhism, and then we have Taoism, things like that. But there are categories there. And then you have the religions of the Americas. But these are big blocks. For a lot of the American ancient religions I study, and Southeast Asia, I see them both talking about this recreating of the center of the universe. The Maya called it a Tolan. They would build up those cities as models of the universe, and they would talk about each one of those city centers as the center of the universe. This is my point. That from my Western mind, I assume that the center of the universe is a single point. But for them, they are totally comfortable with the idea that there are multiple centers. That it is not in conflict that a city like Angkor could be, all of its little temples all over there are all mini centers of the universe. Each one of them, in and of themselves, is a center. And there were many other Khmer cities as well. A lot of them are still just laying out there, still unexplored by archaeology, but they also have those temples. So how is it that they see that the center is everywhere, when I, as a Westerner, think that the center is a single point?
Right. Well, we all kind of think that we're the center of everything. I feel like it's kind of easy. And if you're part of an empire or a culture, of course you think you are right and you are the best. And so why wouldn't you put the center where you are? I mean, we're on a globe, so the center literally can be anywhere, depending on, just rotate.
There be two centers. Are you as a member of Western society comfortable with the thought that I will call 1,000 places the center?
I am, because I don't really much care about it. I've also played wiffle ball, so I'm used to, balls with lots of holes in it. I've heard about quantum, where if you just get the threads between the vibration lines and the strings, that everything makes perfect sense. I know how the Flash can move so fast he can phase himself through states of matter. So yeah, none of this stuff bothers me in the least. Maybe it's because I'm not a religious zealot that I feel that way. But yes, it doesn't concern me whatsoever. I think
that's good. I'm glad.
I think every culture in the world has the right to think that it's special and the best, but they all should also know at some level that they're probably not much more special or better or best than anybody else. And as long as there's that balance, that I'm prideful about what I am, but that recognize that everyone should be prideful about what they are, and that we're all sort of even, I think that's cool enough for me.
I'll throw a little bit of science that, again, I'm out loud asking questions and trying to understand stuff. I'm not trying to give any answers here in this particular segment of what I'm
yeah, whatever it's become.
but here's something that I find interesting. Astrophysicists have been trying to figure out the origin of the universe, right? And for a while we had this Big Bang concept that somewhere there was a big explosion or a big, origin event that started the universe growing and turning into what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But they have now put away the Big Bang theory because our greater and greater telescopes have now illuminated that everything is moving away from everything else at a constant rate of speed. When they tried to find that one center, they couldn't do it. And now, astrophysics is talking about this concept that everything is moving away from everything else at a constant rate of speed. Is that saying that everywhere is the center? Because that's what the Hindus and the Maya have been saying forever. Has our modern science now just begun to express the nature of the universe in the same way that these religions thousands of years ago decided to express it? Is that a coincidence? Do I have it all wrong? I don't know, but it is interesting that we ourselves as modern scientists have failed to find the center of the universe, and we now believe that the center is all over the place. That there is no center. It is simultaneously nowhere and everywhere.
Yes, and these are concepts that are enormous, and with all due respect to Ali Ward and her fabulous podcast, Ologies, I'm going to use the word ology, or the suffix ology, whatever the correct use, the term for that participle of the word is, but theology and philosophy have the same ology at the end of them as all other sciences. So, yes, it has not been lost on me during the course of the almost 7 years I've been doing this show, and it's turned in a lot of different directions and gone from friends I knew talking, about movies or whatever, to talking to academics like yourself and philosophers and clergy and whatever, that a lot of things in science and a lot of things in religion and religions sort of do meet. And while I was surprised about that, I'm no longer surprised about that, because things do make sense, and just because we can't wrap our head around the concept doesn't. So I am much less dogmatic and judgmental of people who are, very religious, because we didn't, what caused the Big Bang? Who's the prime mover there? In nature, God, what's the difference, really? But, I guess except intent. But, so again, these things don't bother me, but again, it's because I'm not particularly dogmatic. I think we got enough stuff to worry about here on terra firma that and we're probably not going to resolve the unprovable and the unknowable and the eternally debatable. One thing I have learned is that there's been secret societies and cults and sects and sectarian almost as long as you can go back and identify whatever was the major at any given time. that doesn't tell me that there's some secret hidden knowledge out there. It tells me that people were always looking for more. No matter what the state of nature was, the state of civilization was, that people were always looking for more, and that's sort of our eternal thing. And to come up with concepts that match the laws of the universe just because we don't understand those laws doesn't surprise me in the least. And I enjoy finding those intersections as opposed to, finding it a way to like become more fundamentalist in any way, shape, or form, except that I don't think that we should have federal mass police officers being deployed in battalions and treating people in this country as if we're taking over Omaha Beach. Oops, politics, sorry. You do not have to say a word about that. Save yourself. Let's segue into something that nobody can get mad at me about. That's a lie. But let's get to the art on those temples, because if you're a carpenter and you have a hammer, you're going to see nails wherever you look. But people see a Stegosaurus. It does look like a Stegosaurus. People see lots of things where they see UFOs and whatever. And listen, discs. Not every disc is a UFO, and not every UFO is a disc. Probably most aren't. But what is the explanation for some of what is the debunking that you want to do? And listen, I do not foreclose the fact that people in the ancient world had imaginations just like we do. I mean, I've had the misfortune of watching, it's not bad, the new Superman movie, and there are monsters in there with different sorts of body types and whatever that I have not particularly seen before, and that does not mean that thing exists in this world today. So just because it was carved on a temple doesn't mean it does, but because it was carved on a temple, it does give it sort of the imprimatur, is that the right word, of that you should believe that it was somehow real. So I'm going to stop and let you sort of address the Stegosaurus in the room.
Okay, well, the Stegosaurus is in a little window about this big, a carved kind of a circle, like a frame. And it's one of, I think, 6 frames coming down this door jamb, or this wall. And so we have other images as well. He does look like a Stegosaurus. But my simple and I think correct explanation is that the artist who carved that was really bad at his job. If you look at the other 5 of the circles, they all have kind of like jungly floral designs and animals in some of them, not in all of them. What I think we're looking at really is not a Stegosaurus, but a water buffalo having its head bent down. You can actually see its horns, and then the thing that looks like the Stegosaurus spine is a jungle plant in the background. It's just badly done. And I'm sure, there was no way that the Khmer artist was like, oh, geez, that looks a little like a dinosaur. They didn't know what dinosaurs were at that time. But really, when you take a hard look at the actual animal without the little spines behind it, just assume the spines are floral designs like the other circles, you can see that he is a water buffalo. And I have stood in front of that piece, and I know where I was standing 50 meters away is the edge of one of their barrages, the water reservoirs, and there was a pack of water buffalo right there. I mean, the actual animal who is depicted there is today less than 50 meters away from the depiction.
Well, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. And listen, but I think it's weird when people these days really say, "Oh, water buffalo." Who'd think that was special? I mean,
those guys that are excited about the Stegosaurus, just absorb water buffalo in your mind and look at the picture again, and actually zoom out if you can, and look at the other circles and what their designs are. You can see that some of the other circles have much more clear that jungle floral, like the big elephant ear leaf trees. Right. That's what's behind him, and the artist was probably in trouble for making such a shit job.
Well, big bulls.
So the context is, I mean, this is a long wall that hits a corner, and then that corner juts out, and it's the frame for a doorway going into the interior of the temple. So it's like right in the corner, and it's this little kind of just like almost like border treatment of a much larger panel of art that's going all the way across, that has those floating apsara, beautiful women going through it, and war scenes. It's got a lot of going on. This little dinosaur is like the size of one of the heads of the art that goes to the left of it. If you're standing right at it, you look along the wall of this thing. There are carvings. There are they love to make these column-looking things, carvings into the walls that look like they're like holes within a window. So there's a lot of those over there too, but there's a ton of art there, and people have zoomed in on this one little circle. But long and the short of it, look again. Look at it. I think people don't recognize, if they're focused on those things they think are the spines on the back, they don't see the horn. The horns are weird. They go back, so you'd think they'd go up like a regular, like a steer, right. But they kind of go back.
Yeah.
And so it's along the side of his head. But once you see the horn, you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, it's a little bit more like a ram, except it's horizontal. It sort of goes outward a little bit, then sort of goes down and sort of curves back around.
They're funny. Those water buffaloes, their horns grow irregularly. I've seen them sticking out in all sorts of weird directions, sometimes not even symmetrically.
Yeah, I think that like a lot of ungulates are like that, and they're with horns, and that may be where some of the visions of different demons and devils and strange horns, came from, along with,
They've also, they're water buffaloes, so they've got that kind of really slick skin, which looks a little reptilian.
And they're badass. I mean, bulls are badass, and most animals were bigger even a few hundred years ago, when the bigger ones didn't, all get hunted to extinction right away, especially a few thousand years ago. I mean, I saw a picture recently of something called a gaur, G-A-U-R. Oh my goodness. If that's not like, Lord Baal personified, or Zeus coming down as a bull, I now get it. I know there's a extinct wild cattle called an oryx, which I don't know if it's quite as musculature as a gaur, but whatever. If it's a bull on steroids, pretty powerful, useful beast.
This particular area of the world we're talking about is that. 1,000 years ago, there were water buffalo hanging around in the rice paddies next to the temples.
Right.
There's still rice paddies, there's still bulls, there's still temples. The same thing still happening. And it's, you can see it with your own eyes.
Are they sort of maybe symbolically guardians of the temple, like some of the Chinese lions sort of are
No, they're cattle. They're people, they're hanging around, probably being fed rice.
Okay, what about the UFO ones? I mean, I'm sure you've seen your share of discs and spacemen claims about petroglyphs and art. Are there any more water buffalo analogous?
Well, geez, I don't know. Offhand, I don't know where any discs in Angkor are. I've seen some in Egypt and other places, and Eastern European art's always talking about it. But here's the funny thing, though. I mean, our conspiracy theorists need to catch up to the times. I mean, the idea that a spaceship, an alien spaceship, would be a disc that kind of wobbles through the sky is a 1950s concept. I mean, science and engineering and astrophysics have all agreed that a disc is a stupid form for a spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
We now that we, back in those days, we were, still in early airplane phase. Now we have made things that go to space. we're not making discs, and discs are now, they're passé. They are 1950s sci-fi. So, I mean, the conspiracy theorists that see these things carved in the walls of ancient places, well, they need to, be updating it and looking for, I don't know, the space shuttle or something. We have long ago discarded, in terms of, physics and engineering, discs are not the way that aliens are going to make it to us. Those are illogically shaped chips.
Yeah, you also don't need to be aerodynamic in space where there's no, air.
Exactly. I mean, those were cool and based on 1950s science. They're no longer practically even theorized.
Do we know? And I know this is terrible, but in different parts of the world it probably represents different things. I mean, I know circles usually represent the sun or halo and holiness or something like that. But what do discs typically are they like the parts of the turtle shell that, or do they typically represent anything, or maybe just the patties on the water? I mean, I have no idea.
Again, I don't know many of these discs from Khmer art. I apologize if you're looking at one right now that I don't know of. But, some of them in the early Christian art are actually kind of like halo things that have been misinterpreted as discs. There's especially Eastern
and horns.
Orthodox art has a lot of things that have like a half disc with rays coming down, and those are really ones that people say, look, this is proof that they were depicting aliens, but it turns out that it was part of a larger tradition with the moon and the sun with the rays. And so there's usually some usually the root of it is a cultural misunderstanding of what that symbol means.
Right.
Now, symbols have so much power and meaning within their own cultural context, but they can look like nothing to somebody else, or they can look like something that they're not. A great example is the Christian cross and the crosses that the people in Mesoamerica made. To Mesoamerica, that cross is a symbol of the four directions in the center.
Right.
To the Christians, there's an entire backstory. But if you're not a Christian, you would be shocked. And of course, we're living in a global world. People understand who Christians are. But if it was the first time you ever heard of Christianity, you're an alien, you come down to Earth, and we show you this two sticks crossing each other. Oh, that's such a powerful symbol. Why is that? That's like a stupid, simple thing. It's two sticks. Well, I mean, it's because of this story of this guy who was God's son, and he died, and he went up to heaven, and we tortured him on this cross, and of all the great things he did, somehow we perversely picked the cross that he was murdered upon. But okay, but it's got a huge, huge, powerful backstory. Every Christian is immediately, put in the space of this wide story around Jesus Christ, where the symbol itself would be confusing if you weren't acquainted with that cultural context. I think that a lot of times we see discs or other symbols that we don't know what they mean.
Well, they tried with a fish, and the truth is, nobody likes fish. I'm kidding.
That one looks like a disc. Yeah, that Jesus fish.
Yeah, I think yes. Well, you can read the Da Vinci
car that looked like it was the fish, but then it had two little engines on the back, and it turned it into the Starship Enterprise.
Oh my God! Yeah, no, that is good. That is really good. Talk about trying to blend all your worlds together. Yeah, so and I'm sure there were fun conspiracies on that one. I mean, Star Trek is part of a lot of conspiracies.
It's always been woke. The new version's woke too. I don't know if you're watching that, but I like it. But it's upsetting a lot of people.
I'm not.
As it always has.
Yeah. It's no moral stance. I watch very few TV shows because I watch way too much wrestling because I'm a 5-year-old. And that's that. When the Khmer were in their empiric phase, what type of like what should I picture their armor and their warfare to be? We picture Roman legionnaires and Trojan and Greek hoplites and what sort of phase would they be in? Like sort of like we see on Shogun, is it Iron Age? Is it still Copper or Bronze Age? I mean, what was their technology and what was their...
Fully Iron Age. And they were masters of metalworking, not just for weapons, but for art. They were absolute masters. But they had swords, long swords. In fact, I'll put a pin in that, but I'll tell you about a magical sword that's gone missing.
Sure.
Their armor was oftentimes that kind of padded, studded armor that you see all over Southeast Asia. They did not wear big, clunky metal plates like Europe did, but they had swords. They had deadly bows. They had big ships. They're just south of Angkor is the huge Lake Tonle Sap. And they would meet the Cham from the south with complete naval armadas. And they didn't have cannons, but they did have the bows and long-range bows. A lot of when you see on the walls of Angkor a fight happening, there's a lot of people with swords in their hands. So that's probably their main melee battle. And then they have a ranged weapon that's bows and arrows. But they were very sophisticated, and they fielded big armies that fought each other, and they would go long distances to attack another kingdom. So they were quite sophisticated when it came to war. They had tactics, they had big armies, they had metal weapons.
So, probably what people could picture in their heads pretty reasonably. Firearms were not yet there. We weren't, even at the end, were we at the blunderbuss phase yet? No, probably not.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not that good on my modern, the history of guns, but I know that I don't know, but I suspect that it was the French that first brought them in, and the French did not come in until after the Khmer were defeated by the Thai, and the Thai Empire turned into Siam, and that's where the French come in and the Dutch.
Let's just say a question about the Thai. Are the Thai Thai, or are they, because I know there were people called Thai Tai, are they the same, or is it two different groups?
I've never heard of THI, but the
THAI
to beat the Khmer are THAI.
Okay.
Like Thailand.
Okay. Oh, so you never heard of TAI? Because they were in China, and they were defeated by, I think, the Qin, the Han.
Okay.
Now.
No, I didn't know about them, but there are. I've been almost frightened to learn Chinese history. It's so long and so complex. I mean, holy moly. That's a rabbit hole that I'd be buried under for years trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, there's only so much in this world that you can actually learn with anything.
It's embarrassing how long and glorious a history that China had, and that it's never in our Western European textbooks. I really do wish we'd spend more time in our early education really trying to understand the other parts of the world instead of just pretending like the world revolves around Western civilization.
Well, if you believe in Eastern civilization, we're reincarnating, so we are early in our education still. I'm only 57. I mean, I have infinite lives to go, so, you can look at it that way, right? I mean, I'm just a snake, and somebody's tugging on my ass, and someone's tugging on my head.
Encouraging and daunting at the same time. Like, hey, when do we get off this Ferris wheel?
Indeed that. Okay, so I promised you that we would stay within an hour, so if you want to get off of this Ferris wheel, this might be a good time. Or if there's anything that I should have asked you about or didn't give you an opportunity to mention about this that we should know about or that you want to add in, this is the time. Otherwise, you can just, plug where people can find your stuff, support you, your tours, your podcast, all of your adventures, the adventures of Luke Caverns, action star, of the Barnhart universe.
Luke is a star, that's for sure. Well, I just promised you I'd talk about this magic sword, which I think is awesome. There's kind of like a Khmer Excalibur.
Nice.
It's called the Preah Khan Reach. And it was a magic sword that whoever held it was the king of the Khmer Empire. And it had its own temple that this sword was safely stored in. And it's what's the name of it? I think it's Preah Khan, which is the name of the temple complex. And there's a whole very interesting building that was just dedicated to holding this sword. There is a Khmer story that's told on the walls in hieroglyphs in the city that said the king's daughter started dating this guy who the king did not like. He was kind of an upstart. He didn't have the right pedigree. He was a troublemaker. But that that boy managed to jump up and steal the sword from the king, and he became king. That is like a widely understood thing, and the sword continued in the hands of the Khmer king forever. In fact, there are pictures of this sword from the 1970s sitting in the king's palace in Phnom Penh just as the Vietnam War rages through Cambodia's capital falls, and right then, like 1976, somebody steals the sword out of the palace as the chaos is happening and it's looted. So this magic sword, which is basically the Khmer Excalibur, it's somewhere. Somebody's got it. The Chinese have it, or somebody else has it. About once every 3 years ago, I see some report that says someone found the Preah Khan Reach in this bog. But I look at it, and I look at the old pictures of it hanging in the palace. It's not the same sword, so it's still gone.
Spielberg?
It's an actual magical sword, which is a missing artifact on the planet.
Spielberg, if you're listening, Indiana Jones and the Sword of Preah Khan.
The Preah Khan Reach.
Or even the
cool-looking sword, and it was, if you owned it, you were the king, just like Excalibur.
Or even the daughter. I know they passed the torch, and people were outraged about that too. I mean, I was outraged about 80-year-old Harrison Ford punching people out. I can injure myself getting off of this couch easily enough, let alone giving someone a right cross. Anyway, but of course, Indiana Jones and the
it's a fun. I love those stories.
Me too.
The Excalibur, and there's one from Southeast Asia from the Khmer. It's the Preah Khan Reach, and someday somebody's going to find it, and it's going to be like the Spear of Destiny. They could make a whole Constantine movie around it.
I first of all, I'm totally down with that. I like the Constantine thing. I like adding the magic into that. I mean, there's all the tomb of Genghis Khan. I mean, there's the world is a fantastic. I mean, imagine if Moses and Genghis Khan ended up being buried in the same place. Oh, with Alexander the Great, it's like there's one place in the
dang it! All these missing bodies were just stockpiled in one place all this time. Shit.
That's right, and they were taken there by the first vampire Cain, of course. I mean, so there we go. Where's Mel Brooks when I need him? Anyway.
All right, Jeff. Yep, it's Super Bowl day. We're going to cut it early, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for giving me a platform to share with your audience. Yeah. I think at this point they know how to find me, but I'm Archeo Ed on a podcast. I do have a YouTube channel, Archaeologist Ed Barnhart. Would love some more subscribers on that. I'll send you a little press kit that maybe you can put in your show notes.
Absolutely.
That's the way. Nobody actually finds you from me saying it out loud. They go, "Oh, I should look at the show notes. There it is."
And if you want to send me an outro song too, or the theme to the show, I'm happy to do that too. And I'm sure you can sneak in a reference to Palenque. So anyway, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here, Ed. You can check out. I'll do my plugs, but you get to your stuff. You must not let Mrs. Dr. Barnhart down, and I hope whatever team you're rooting for wins, and I hope whatever food you're hoping for is there. So
happy wife, happy life. And honestly, I am a nerd. I mostly like the commercials, and just between me and you, I like watching the Puppy Bowl before. That's really my favorite part of the day.
Yeah, it really is everybody's favorite part of the day. And before you go, everyone know, I'm going to be recording a wrestling podcast at 5:30, so I couldn't care less about the Super Bowl. If the Ravens aren't in it, I give up on, I don't care. So I'm very much a one team kind of guy, especially since I stopped doing fantasy football about 7 or 8 years ago, which is a different story altogether. All right, again, thanks so much. Feel free to exit off the screen. I will do my plugs. If you want to follow me, you can find me at IcarusFellMD. You can find me on Facebook if you like. Yes, Ed is waving goodbye to everyone because this is audio only, so you can't see him.
So, I'll see you again, Jim.
I can't wait. I hope so. Thank you. This show is called Garden of Thought. If you're here because you followed Ed, thank you. Welcome. If you're here by accident, welcome. Just please subscribe to Garden of Thought, and you'll get generally at least one, but sometimes up to 3 podcasts a week. Some are a lot like this one, but some are sort of Joe Roganish without the other embrace of broness and conspiracy and manospherism. But there's some, I'm a bro-ish, sort of. And some are very grounded, I don't know how else to say it, but legal, business, tech, science. We've been really talking to a lot of immigration attorneys who are on the front line of wars one way or another, whatever you think of it. In the U.S. here. And then my little guilty pleasure. It's not a guilty pleasure. It's a pleasure. My show where I co-host with a variety of wrestlers ranging from BJ Black, who you might know as Justin Gabriel from WWE, Mr. Thomas from MLW Wrestling, Vinny Pacifico, who more of you are going to probably know him from being a movie star in horror movies than from wrestling. Akira Kwan, the current new leader of the Contra faction in MLW Wrestling, possibly some others as well. Some other people who've said yes and to be co-hosts, and we talk to people in wrestling, often about wrestling, but almost every single time about non-wrestling things, either as much or more, such as and also I do a bunch of stuff on Wrestling Soup, so please subscribe to them. And if you do like wrestling, please also subscribe to the Wrestling Soup and Friendos feed, where there's a whole host of shows on that are ancillary. And I do a lot of stuff on there as well, including I dropped some of the old Book of Black shows, which are the ones with PJ Black. And you've got Aaron Stevens, who some of you may know as, or remember as Damian Sandow from WWE. Tyrus was the NWA champion, but some of you may remember him as Brodus Clay from WWE, where Brodus Clay and the Funkadelics, Somebody Call Your Mama. There was also a show I just dropped with I'm sorry, was it EC3? But I just dropped one with Jimmy Jacobs. Oh, and Super Panda. I'll probably drop one every 2 or 3 weeks on there until we get current on the new shows. So please subscribe to both. Follow me on social media. I'm very happy to follow and have discourse with you. And once again, thanks very much, Ted. Please support him. Great guy, very generous with his time, very knowledgeable, very honest, as you can tell. And thanks for tuning in. And I don't know what the show song is, because I don't know if he's going to pick one or not. But if it is, it'll be something hopefully appropriate, or something really like lame and easy, like the Super Bowl thing. Meaning like the general one, like from ABC Sports, like 40 years ago. All right, see y'all.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ นำថ្មីខ្មៅពេញក្រមរូបល្អសែនសំគ្មានស្រីណាដូចខ្មៅជាស្រីខ្មែរគ្រប់លក្ខសំសូនប្រាជ្ញាក៏ឆ្លាតស្ដាប់ពីម៉ែអើថ្ងៃនេះបនចូលឆ្នាំថ្មីបងឃើញខ្មៅស្រីអូនរៀបចំផ្ទះបោះរៀនទេវតាដាក់ការថ្វាយព្រះដាំស្លរូតរាំងជូនម្ដាយទៅវត្តបងឃើញខ្មៅពូនភ្នំខ្សាច់រួចអូនដាក់បាតដងទឹកស្រង់ព្រះជួនងាកឃើញបងញញឹមសែនស្រង់អូនខ្មៅតែឈ្មោះសាច់សូដូសំឡីបានអីប្រាប់បងកុំចាំយូរដល់ចង់រួម baby make some move you need help baby I can do នៅជាមួយនឹងបងគ្មានអ្នកណាគេពេបជ្រាយ if we get along រឿងពិបាកក៏ទៅជាងាយបាយបងបីត្រកងហើយខំទឹកអប់ដែលអូនភ័យបើសិនមានបំណងបងនឹងបើកជាឲ្យទូលាយបើគេមើលលើទុកឲ្យបងមើលក្រោមព្រោះចំណែនយើងប្រហែលជាមានតែមកចកោបើអ្នកចំណែនអូនគេចំណែននឹងរូបឆោតែបើវាចំណែនបងពួកនឹងមិនដែរចូលចំណោមបងឈ្មោះមុនល្អទេថាអូនស្មើតែតាមការពិតសាច់សមកថ្ងៃតែមកកាយស្រីថ្លៃហើយខ្មៅពីតូចឆ្នាំថ្មីខ្មៅពេញក្រមរូបល្អសែនសំគ្មានស្រីណាដូចខ្មៅជាស្រីខ្មែរគ្រប់លក្ខសំសូនប្រាជ្ញាក៏ឆ្លាតស្ដាប់ពីម៉ែអើថ្ងៃនេះបនចូលឆ្នាំថ្មីបងឃើញខ្មៅស្រីអូនរៀបចំផ្ទះបោះរៀនទេវតាដាក់ការថ្វាយព្រះដាំស្លរូតរាំងជូនម្ដាយទៅវត្តបងឃើញខ្មៅពូនភ្នំខ្សាច់រួចអូនដាក់បាតដងទឹកស្រង់ព្រះជួនងាកឃើញបងញញឹមសែនស្រង់អូនខ្មៅតែឈ្មោះសាច់សូដូសំឡី
RXDH 'cause that shit